Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So we move on to the next chapter of our curriculum. This chapter is about determining the nasab or jar status. So in the previous chapters we've come across certain words or certain cases where the nar and the nasab and the jar status has been that looks the same. So for example, if we remember the singular masculine, for example, for mu'minun, let's say the plural of the mu'minuna. So the rafa is mu'minuna, and the jar is the nasab is mu'minina, and the jar is mu'minina as well. So therefore, because they look the same, we need to know certain things so that we can differentiate between whether the isim is in nasab status or jar status. Similarly with attached pronouns as well, they look the same in both jar status and nasab status, as well as certain other things that we came across. So fragments are more than a word but less than a sentence. So understanding the following three fragments will help in identifying whether the status of an ism is nasab or jar. So the first fragment is called the jar and majroor fragment, and this is a fragment between an ism and a harf. The second is the harf of nasab and its ism, and this fragment is between an ism and a harf as well. And an idafa fragment, which is a fragment between an ism and an ism. So if we start with the first one, which is called jar and majroor fragment, and the jar is also known as the harf of jar. So you can say harf of jar or you can say jar. Is a harf which makes the next ism in the jar status. So this ism that's now in the jar status, the second ism. So the jar is a harf, and it will make the ism that comes after it into the jar status, and that ism is called the majroor. And the jar and the majroor together, that's the jar and majroor fragment. And the jar and the majroor are always next to each other, so meaning there can never be a gap between a jar and a majroor. So jar is the fragment, and it makes the next ism into the jar status, and that ism in the jar status is called majroor. And a jar only ever works on an ism. It can never work on a fi'l, and it doesn't work on a harf. So this is a table of the common jars, also known as the harf of jars. So if we start on the left side, so the jar is B, which means with, and then you have ta. So this is only used for Allah, and it means I swear by. So you say Tallahi, I swear by Allah. And remember, so this is the harf of jar or the jar that will make the next ism in the jar status, which is called the majroor. And so the next one is ka, which means like, so mean a comparison, like when we say, like a tree, for example. And then you have la and li, and this is used, the meaning is for, and it's in respect to a possession. And wa also means I swear by. So there's different types of, these letters, you'll notice that as you progress through the chapters, that there's different types of the same letter. So this wa is a harf of jar, and it means I swear by. That's why, you might hear Arabs saying wallahi, which means I swear by Allah. But wa can be used for anything, so you can attach it to other things, like in the Quran, wa shamsi, wa duhaha, that, I swear by the sun. And min means from, fi means in, rubba means maybe, and ada means except. And then you have an, which means about or away from, and ala, which means upon. It can mean against, it can mean on. And hatta, which means until, and ila means to or towards, and munzu means since or for, and muz means since, and khala means except, and khasha means except as well. So all of these harfs make the next ism in the jar status, and that ism will be called the majroor. And these five that are shown here, they attach directly to the next word, the wa, the lam, the kaf, the ta and the b. The li, usually in this case with a kasra, but it takes a fatha when it comes before an attached pronoun, except for the yi one. So that will have, the lam will have a kasra, so it will be li, not la yi. But this is something that perhaps in these examples we can show. So the first example is ilayka, which means towards you, to or towards you. So the ila is the jar, which is the harf of jar, also known as harf of jar, and it makes the next ism in the jar status. So the kaf is called the majroor. It is an attached pronoun. So attached pronoun, the attached pronoun kaf is in jar status, even with the fatha on it. So even though it's got a fatha on it, it's actually in the jar status because it's the majroor, and the majroor always takes the jar status. So if we have, the next one is ala hudan, and if you just remember the word hudan, because it's got an alif maksura on it, it's actually non-flexible. So the rafa of hudan is hudan, the nasab of hudan is still hudan, and even in jar status is hudan. So you can't actually tell by looking just at that word hudan that what status is it in. And whereas in this case, when we see the ala before it, so ala hudan, which means upon guidance, the ala is a harf of jar, and it makes the next ism in the jar status. So therefore, the hudan in this fragment is the majroor, and is therefore in the jar status. And then here we have lahum, which means for them, or they have, and the la is the harf of jar, and it makes the next ism in the jar status, and the hum is therefore the majroor, and it's actually an attached pronoun, and the original independent pronoun, if we remember the pronoun, the independent pronoun chart is hum, which means they, and so this is the attached pronoun version hum, and therefore this attached pronoun is in the jar status because it's a majroor. The next example is fil ardi, which means in the earth. We mentioned the earth because al ardi has al on it, so it's the earth. So fil ardi, in the earth. So fi is the harf of jar, and it makes the next ism in the jar status, and therefore the al ardi is majroor, and an ism which is in the jar status, which you can actually see because it's got a kasra on it. So that's quite obvious that it's in the jar status. And here ka asfi, and again this means like straw. So the kaf is the harf of jar, and it makes the next ism in the jar status. And then you have asfin, which is the majroor, and ism which is in the jar status. And this is obvious because it's got the kasratain. So the next fragment is the harf of nasab and its fragment. And its ism, sorry. So the fragment, this is a fragment between an ism and a harf. So the harf of nasab puts its ism, the ism that it acts on, in the nasab status. And it always needs an ism to act on. It will never be alone. So a harf of nasab will never be by itself. It needs an ism to act on. So harf of nasab and its ism can have other words in between them, unlike the harf of jar and the majroor, or the jar and majroor, which are always next to each other. So the jar and the majroor fragment are always next to each other. They can never have anything in between them. But whereas the harf of nasab and its ism can be further apart, so meaning you can have other words in between. And the harf of nasab only connects to an ism, not a fi'l. So here's the harf of nasab table, and some common ones. So if you start from the left side, the harf of nasab inna, it means certainly, or no doubt, and anna means that, ka anna means as though, and bi anna means because, and lakinna means however, and la Allah means perhaps. It can mean so that, and it can mean hopefully, and later means if only, and li anna means because. So if we go through some examples, then we have inna hum, which means certainly they. So inna is the harf of nasab, so it makes its ism in the nasab status, and the hum is the ism of the harf of nasab. So the harf of nasab is working on the hum. It acts on the hum and it makes it into the nasab status. And the hum is an attached pronoun, and the original pronoun, the independent pronoun version, is hum as well, which means they. So that's why in this case, this hum is nasab status because of the inna. And the next example would be anna lahum jannatin. So this means that for them are gardens. So anna is a harf of nasab. It makes its ism in the nasab status. And the jannatin is the ism of the harf of nasab. So it is an ism, and it is therefore in the nasab status because it's the harf of nasab is acting on this word jannatin. And as this ism is a feminine plural ending combination, which you can see the yellow highlight, that it's got the alif and the ta, so it's an ending combination, it can be either nasab or jar, as both look the same. So if you remember the feminine plural chart, so the rafa version of jannah is jannatun, and the nasab version will be jannatin, and the jar version will be jannatin as well. But as it is an ism of the harf of nasab, it is nasab in status. Also, you'll notice as well that there's a gap between the harf of nasab anna and its ism jannatin. So if you look at the example, it's anna lahum jannatin. So the lahum is in between. So it actually breaks up the harf of nasab and its ism. So unlike the harf of jar and majroor fragment, which always comes next to each other, and that lahum, so in the example anna lahum jannatin, the lahum is actually a harf of jar fragment. So the lam means for and hum means they, and that's why they always come together. But whereas the harf of nasab and the ism that it acts upon can be separated by other words, in this example. So the next example is laytani, which means if only I. So layta is the harf of nasab, which makes its ism in the nasab status, and the ni is therefore the ism that the harf of nasab is. It's the ism of the harf of nasab. It is an attached pronoun, and the independent version is ana, which means I. So it is therefore in nasab status because it's the ism of the harf of nasab. And the last fragment is called the idafa fragment. So this fragment is between an ism and another ism, and the idafa indicates possession. So for example, the book of Allah. So sometimes the sentence needs to be rearranged to see the of, which is the possession word. For example would be Yusuf's house, so you can say house of Yusuf, which shows the possession. So the idafa is made up of two parts. One is the mudaf, and if you remember that a partly flexible ism can become fully flexible when it becomes a mudaf, which we mentioned before when we were discussing partly flexible words. And this mudaf can be in any status, so it can be rafa, it can be nasab, and it can be jar. And the mudaf ilay is always in jar status, always. So the mudaf and the mudaf ilay always come next to each other, just like the jar and majroor fragment. So meaning nothing can come in between a mudaf and a mudaf ilay. So that's the common thing that the harf of jar fragment and the idafa fragment share. That meaning that nothing comes in between the harf of jar and the majroor, and similarly nothing comes between the mudaf and the mudaf ilay. Whereas the harf of nasab and its ism can be separated. So the conditions for an idafa fragment are two. So the mudaf must be light. So light meaning if it's an ending sound, we get rid of the tanween. So instead of having two dhammas, it has one. If it has two fathas, you convert it to one. And if it has two kasras, you convert it to one to make it light. And if we're talking about an ending combination, then and it has a noon on it, part of the ending combination, then get rid of the noon to make it light. So the mudaf has to be light. And the other rule is the mudaf cannot have an al on it. It can never have an al on it. So some examples here that we got asabi'ahum, which means their fingers. And if you actually rearrange that, you can say fingers of theirs. Fingers of theirs. So it means their fingers. So asabi'a is the mudaf. And you'll notice that it is light, because the heavy version will be asabi'an, and it has no al on it. So it follows the rules for mudaf. And in this case, this mudaf is nasab status because of the fatah. And then the mudaf ilay, the hum is the mudaf ilay. It is an attached pronoun, and the original independent pronoun is hum, which means they. And therefore, because this is a mudaf ilay, this hum is in the jar status because it's a mudaf ilay. And the second is a'dallahi, which means the covenant of Allah. Or another way of saying is Allah's covenant. So a'da is the mudaf, and you'll notice it is light and there's no al on it. So it follows the rule of a mudaf. And in this case is nasab. But remember, mudaf can be any status. It can be rafa, it can be nasab, it can be jar. And then the word Allah is mudaf ilay. It is an ism, and it is therefore in jar status, which you can see because it has a kasra on it. But because it's a mudaf ilay, it automatically is jar status, even if it doesn't look like that. Just a note that we should always remember, that when we speak about the word Allah, we should be careful we should be careful to say the name. We should be taken to say the name of Allah instead of saying Allah. So we can either say, lafzul jalala whenever we speak about the word Allah. Otherwise, we should say the word Allah or the name of Allah, etc., instead of saying Allah directly. So another example is zawjuka, which means your wife. So zawju is the mudaf. It is light. The heavy version will be zawjun. So it is light and there is no al on it. So it follows the two rules for mudaf, and in this case the mudaf is rafa, and the kaf, which is a mudaf ilay, it is an attached pronoun, and the independent pronoun version is anta, which means you, masculine, which becomes, as an attached pronoun, it becomes ka, and therefore because it's a mudaf ilay, it is in jar status, even though it doesn't look like that because it's got a fatah on it. Another example would be zikru rahmati rabbika. Now this is a what we call a idafa chain, which is multiple idafas connected together. So zikru rahmati rabbika, this means a mention of the mercy of your master. So zikru is the first mudaf. You notice that it follows the two rules of the mudaf, which is it is light and it has no al on it. And in this case is rafa status, but remember the mudaf can be any status. It can be rafa, it can be jar, it can be nasab, it doesn't matter. And then rahmati is the first mudaf ilay. So it is an ism and it is in jar status because of the mudaf ilay, but in this case it's obvious because you can see the kasra as well, that it's in jar status. But also the rahmati is the second mudaf, and if you look at it, it actually follows the two rules of a mudaf. It is light. The heavy version will be rahmatin, so it's rahmati, so it's light, and there's no al on it either. And then the next word, which is the next ism, which is rabbi, this is the second mudaf ilay, the mudaf ilay to rahmati, so it's the second mudaf ilay, and it is therefore in jar status. Also, it is the third mudaf, because if you look closely, rabbi is light and there's no al on it. And then finally, rabbi ka, so the ka is the third mudaf ilay. It is an attached pronoun. The original independent pronoun is anta, which means you in the masculine version, and it's because it's a mudaf ilay, it is therefore jar in status. And then we can move on to the next aspect, which is what we call special mudafs or zarf. So some mudafs do not always create the meaning of possession. So a zarf is connected to time and place, and this will be discussed in more detail later on, inshallah. So the special mudaf chart, which is called the zarf, which is the mudaf, or is connected to time and place. This is the first chart, so we just quickly go through it. So we start from the left side. So baina means between, hawla means around, surrounding, inda can mean with, by, or at. Min ladun means especially from, and qabla means before. Ma'a means with, amama means in front of, khalfa means behind, wara'a means far behind, far beyond or behind, and ba'da means after, and qaddama means right in front of, lada means in the presence of, fawqa means above, ta'ta means below, and duna means besides, other than, or even less than. Now note, these special mudafs, they keep a fatha at the end, so meaning they have a nasab status, unless a harf of jar comes before it, because if the harf of jar comes before it, then it will make these ism into the jar status. So these special mudafs will act as a majroor, so they'll have a jar status. And if they do not, and in addition, if they do not themselves, because they're special mudafs, if they don't have a mudaf ilay, then they keep a dhamma. Then they keep a dhamma instead of the nasab. So meaning they remain in rafa status if they don't have a mudaf ilay, because these are all mudafs or special mudafs. So if they don't have a mudaf ilay, then they'll remain in rafa status, or they'll instead of taking a nasab, they'll take instead of taking a fatha, they'll take a dhamma. That's like, for example, like qabla, which means before. So if it doesn't have a mudaf ilay, then you would just say qablu and keep the dhamma. So this is the special mudaf chart 2. So these special mudaf are not zarf, so they're not connected to time or place, so they can appear in any status. So they can appear as rafa, nasab, jar, whichever one. So ba'dun means some of or part of, mithlu means similar, ayyun means any or which, and nafsu means same, kullun means all. It can mean, depending on its mudaf ilay, it can mean all, each, or every, which we'll discuss in a second. And gairu means other than. So the kullun, if the mudaf ilay is singular and common, so the meaning will be each and every. So for example, we've written here kullu kitabin. So if you look at the word kitabin, yes, it's obviously it's jar because it's a mudaf ilay, but kitabin is singular and it's common, so there's no al on it. So it's kitabin, it's singular and common, therefore this would mean each and every book. And if the mudaf ilay is singular and proper, then the meaning would be entire. So example, kullul kitabi, so there's an al on it, so therefore it's proper, and it's singular, kitabi, al-kitabi. So kullul kitabi means the entire book. And if the mudaf ilay is plural and proper, then the meaning is that you use the word all. So for example, kullul kutubi, so the word al-kutubi has al on it, so it's proper, and it's kutubi, which is plural, which means books. So kullul kutubi means all of the books. There's also 5 special isms that appear as mudafs. They do not show their status through ending sounds like other mudafs. They show their status through a specific ending letter instead. So the rafa status that normally ends with dhamma, in this case the word will end in waw, and the nasab status, which normally ends with fatha, in this case the word ends with an alif. And in jar status, normally it ends with kasra, in this case the word ends in the ya. So this is only in 5 special isms which are listed in this table. So if we start from the left side, you can see that the non-mudaf normal version is abun, which means father. So if you want that in the rafa status, which is on the far right side, it will be abu. So you can see that there's a wa at the end, and that's what shows that it's rafa. and then the nasab is aba, and you can see there's an alif there, that's what shows that it's nasab. And then in the jar it's abi, and you can see the ya with the sukoon, that shows that it's in jar status. And then the next one is akhun, which means brother. And then akhu, again the wa indicates that it's rafa. Akha, the alif indicates it's nasab, and the akhi, the ya indicates that it's jar. And then hamun, which is in-law. Khamu, again the wa indicates rafa. Khama, the alif indicates nasab, and the khami, the ya indicates the jar. And then famun, which means mouth. Then fu, again the wa indicates rafa. The fa, the alif with the which is attached to the fa, indicates the nasab, and the fi, which is the ya, indicates the jar status. And the next word is called zu, which is possessor of, but there is no non-mudaf version of that, so it always appears, it always comes as a mudaf. So when the mudaf is rafa, it's zu because of the waw. When it's za and you can see the alif, then it's a nasab status, and if you see z, then it's in jar status. Now, understanding and recognizing these fragments that we've discussed, they help to differentiate between the status of isms, especially in certain cases where the jar and the nasab look the same. So as per usual, we always recommend to review the vocabulary list chapter at the end of this book regularly, ideally at the end of every session this curriculum is studied, so that your knowledge of Arabic grammar increases with your vocabulary, inshallah.